everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There is a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. All is appreciated. Every little bit counts. Be sure to use friends and family. And the StreamYard is down there for anybody that wants to join the panel. Tonight, I'm going to summarize what we've watched in the last 7 videos. Let me pull up my screen, show you what we're talking about. If you go to El Perro, and you see these videos from court tactics that destroy the foundation or foundational family units, First Amendment and its 5 parts, Your Supreme Powers, a constitutional essay on the importance of knowledge. This is where I'm trying to help people embed the idea that in order for you to be able to be progressively more successful in this modern world and dealing with the courts and education and medical society and military and all of it, employment, everything, it's time for you to take up your position in it and start learning that stuff, learning how to free yourself little by little bits of education here and there on how this system actually works. When you have to deal with CPS, you're forced to gain knowledge. I'm urging you to start gaining that knowledge on your own. Start learning to be autodidactic. Do not believe me. Do not believe the neighbor. Do not believe the government. And for crying out loud, don't even believe your mother. Do your research so you know. So moms and dads, when you instruct your children, it's more so about instructing them on both sides of the track so that they see the positives and negatives, so that they can learn to be able to discern for themselves, so they can take up the importance of their own observances and critical thought processes to think outside of the box. It's important because it's your own downfall. And like I've said before, I used to be a fucking fool. I used to be that bitch ass slave. I can't do it anymore because I've got certain knowledge that says I'm not supposed to be. It's called bearing false witness. I can't put false information into a record anymore. In that, the information that I did put in that record, I have to correct it. Atrocities that stem from the indoctrination. This is where I started this week. Education, indoctrination, and the atrocities it can lead to, by explaining that by taking up the public education system and giving up your responsibility to educate your own children. This is the part of Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So if you're not going to follow my word, I'm going to have to deny you. And if you're not going to be a priest of my word under your children, I have to deny your children as well. And that's one of the first things we do. We give up that spiritual teaching of raising our children in the ways of the world and think that a public education system in a separation of church and state polity is going to do anything. It's not. And I think a large part of it is people are willing to say that they're Christians and that they follow those doctrines, but in fact, they don't even know them. They don't make any attempt to read them and discern for themselves what is. And those that do go to church regularly, they sit there and listen to a man on a pulpit while passing a tray looking for fiat currency to pay tribute to that false patriarch during their prayer session in public. So I see a lot of problems with the way it operates. But again, through these last 7 videos, plus today's video, the summary of the last 7 videos, I hope people will comprehend that the foundational principles is what we need to start comprehending. Not how this man believes it should operate or how this man believes it should operate, because then we end up becoming Hitler's willing executioners. We allow for that false patriarch and that false education to misguide us and to literally abandon our children in that guidance. It's sad. So the summary here of the imperative message of manning one's post, as I spoke in the last video, is to understand that you're known and formed according again to those Christian scriptures in Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth from the womb, I sanctified thee and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. And here we are through an enumeration of birth and the granting of a false nationality, and then spending our lives in servitude, paying tribute to it merely on a belief system because our mom and dad taught us that, hey, you got to have a social security card, a social security number and account to get a job. No, you don't. Study to shew thyself worthy unto God, not another man, a workman needing not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And we're supposed to be vigilant and communicate truth even in the dark and urgent times. This is the thing about having to have the sense about us in those catastrophes, that we're the calm ones to help keep our children protected and safe, not just in the physical sense, but in the mental sense, helping them deal with real life traumas, even as little children, by being able to deal with them ourselves and not putting so much emphasis on somebody else being the quote first responders. Just like the government, it doesn't operate without you first. You have to start learning to stand up, and you have to remain steadfast in the good works and the bearing of truth. This is the part about Titus 3:8. This is a faithful saying that I will, that thou constantly affirm, that he who believed in God be careful to maintain good works. These things are good and profitable unto men. So if you want them to be good and profitable unto your children, then you too have to maintain good works. So that when somebody's not maintaining good works and you or your children involved, you can still protect your children. Again, it's sad that we've given up our post. And like I said, it's little by little. You have to start taking those steps, though. You have to keep humility and know that you don't know it all, but you're going to get better. So you can't go through it with trepidation and fear. You have to go through it not in cowardice, but in faith, upholding integrity, and do it without pride. Do it knowing that even though there might be an altruistic sense to it, that you're getting something out of it. But again, like the First Amendment, my freedom of expression itself is a great right. And it's altruistic to me that I get to express it here today, hopefully again tomorrow, as part of my freedom. But exponentially, it's everybody else's right to know. And that's so much more enumerated than I myself am. So even just the few viewers that I've got today, now, this video lasts and others will watch it. So I urge all of you moms and dads out there, do as much as you can to watch these videos, these last 7 videos plus today. So 8 videos here, and watch them over again until you get it. And you learn how to start doing the research. Again, don't believe me. Don't believe the neighbor. Don't believe the government. For crying out loud, don't even believe your mom and dad. Take everything they tell you to heart. And hopefully, if they're doing it right or the best they can, they're going to be showing you both sides of the track. They're going to show you the good and the bad. It's like Kenny Rogers again. They're going to teach you how to hold and when to fold, when to walk away, when to run. Because even life is a big gamble. It's a big test. Just like riding a bike. I've always seen it as a test because it always seemed like everybody's been testing me all my life. Everybody. But that's okay. I understand it now. I understand it's for my own betterment. Because as long as I take each one with a lesson and improve upon myself and show that I can adapt and change, that's my progression, and that's all I have to worry about. It's like the 12-step prayer says, the serenity prayer. I've got my own little version. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know that's only me. I can't change you. I can explain this stuff to you, but I can't comprehend it for you. You have to do your research. You have to do your contemplation. You have to observe, contemplate, and then hopefully learn how to express it as it applies to yourself, and hopefully so you can teach it to your children. Again, this is the thing about the give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach him to fish, he learns how to fish for himself for a lifetime. And on top of that, he now has that talent that he can go forth with and share. So it's a call to be watchful, faithful, and above all, trustworthy, particularly to your children. Particularly to your children. Those are the ones we fail. Every last one of my parents, I feel, failed me. Even the ones that adopted me. Granted, they did everything. They did a lot for me. And I'm going to say that it outweighs anything they did against me. But even in their age, they stood there and looked at me and said, Keith, the police are your authority. So who's deceived? Who abandoned their post? They even tried to bring me up in the church. But you can't bring somebody up in the church and expect them to hold to the church regime if you're not holding to it. Thank God I rose above those expectations, because I've been saying, fuck you, you ain't my daddy all my life. See, I have faith on my mind, hope in my heart, and charity in my actions. Everything I do here, like I said, hit the PayPal link if you want. Every little bit helps. But I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't need the PayPal. It's nice. I enjoy it, and I do appreciate it. But with or without that PayPal, I still have a voice, and I still have a way to put it out there. You have to learn how to build on knowledge. That's what I'm trying to do with my companion, with her situation. She's got dementia. All these medical associates in the area keep trying to send her bills and everything. I'm trying to get everybody to understand that, much like you can't charge a child because they're not competent, she has reached a stage in her life where she's not competent, and they keep saying that she's got to pay these bills. Oh, no man anything but to love one another, for to love one another is to fulfill the law. And this is an underlying lesson of teaching a man to fish, in that it's the intangible lesson itself through the material actions that bring forth that welling of knowledge. And like I said, it's like the guy fishing yesterday has new techniques tomorrow. It becomes more efficient, more convenient, even more comfortable. Just like there's many ways to skin a cat, there's many ways to catch a fish. Same thing with this thing about knowledge. There's many ways to do things. And this is why I urge everybody, all you moms and dads out there that are feeling trapped, like you're already entrapped in that bitch ass slave system. There are little things that you can do along the way to learn. and set things up so that you can manage your own affairs. And I'll be talking about this here shortly. And in this aspect of the lesson, it's imperative to comprehend it for what it is. And that is, like I said yesterday, we did things a certain way. And because of our learning and our progressive learning and our intuition, instincts, and desire to make things easier and more progressive and more plentiful and more accessible, we have to recognize the empowerment of that knowledge and why it's so important to learn it today instead of learning the history of yesterday. See, we can use the history of yesterday and all the technology and everything that came about through the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance and all that, and use it for progression. But again, like I've mentioned with this overreaching government, it ends up with seemingly today in the modern society, a public education system rampant around the world that is doing nothing but indoctrinating every child. And I think it's important that moms and dads start taking that inherent responsibility back to bring the children up in the ways of the Lord so they will not waver. And again, I'm not asking everybody to be a Christian or a Catholic or Protestant or Methodist or anything like that. I'm talking about the principles, the morals and ethics that are written on our heart, despite any God. See, there seems to be something natural in us, that inherent goodness and respect for another man in the image and likeness of our own selves. See, the Garden of Eden flows forth upon the earth, and man, as sojourners with that very God that created it, are his stewards to help replenish that earth. In that replenishing of the earth, it says to go forth and multiply. And that's literally, if you want to look at it in the sense of any kind of slavery, that's who I am indentured to. That's the oath I accept. The immutable promise to seek his knowledge, to seek his counsel. And in that, I'm talking about truth. I'm not talking about God. I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about the truth. The objective and overlying patent truth. I'm not going to accept anything less. And I don't want to see why you do. And it's a terrible thing that we allow our children to grow up in a world that does nothing but impugn it even more and more. As time goes on, bigger and bigger lies are accepted with no consequences. And that's where the atrocities come from, people sitting there doing their job. I'm just doing my job. In the meantime, their job is to do the paperwork of their coworkers that are kidnapping and making merchandise out of the brethren of the children of Israel. And don't even know it. It's a commercially bound system where the man's word is his bond. And you keep running your mouth saying, I'm a resident, I'm a United States citizen, without knowing what it is, to your own detriment. So let's take a look. And I'm going to show you something about trusts. And this is just a general chat GTP thing that I entered, and you can enter it in yours, and you're going to come up with generally the exact same answer, because this is fact in law. And you'll see I worded it in a specific way as to the second question that I pose here. Because a lot of people think, as I did, with all the different grammar styles that they use, that it means a distinct, different jurisdiction. And come to find out, again, this is why you do your research. Because like I said, I too used to believe that and said that all over the place. But the fact of the fact of the matter is that there's one legal name, and it works across the jurisdictions regardless. It's a personification, and this is a relationship that every man has with this world. There's no way around it. The distinction is whether it's a creation of the state or a creation of your own. And in that, again, like I've said many times, it's important to understand the language. The English language can be so twisted and perverted, but once you learn it, how it twists and perverts things, you can untwist it and speak it the truth. So let's take a look first. It says, if the benefactor, or if it is the benefactor that gives to the beneficiary, does the same relationship of interaction exist with grantor and grantee, as well as trustor and trustee? In other words, what I'm trying to point out here is the living man as the benefactor. And he's the one that gives everything to the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the person, just like the grantor is the living being, and the grantee is the person. The trustor is the living being, and the trustee is the person. Okay, so understand that concept first, folks, because then we're going to get into the names, and then we're going to get into the positions in this trust. And it says, yes, the relationship between grantor and grantee and trustor and trustee follow a similar dynamic of giver, active party, and receiver, passive party, the person. The active party, the actual party, the one that needs a passport. Okay? Party, or one who acts on behalf of the giver. Just like benefactor and beneficiary. Here's how these roles compare. Benefactor, the person who gives gifts, supports, donations. Beneficiary, the person who receives the gift. Okay? Grantor, grantee, the person who grants a property title, legal rights, etc. Grantee, the person who receives what is granted. And this you'll see common in real estate, where the grantor transfers ownership to the grantee. Trustor, trustee. Okay, understand this, folks. Trustor or settlor. Okay, if you want to settle something in these courts, you have to act as the trustee. And that means you have to be the person who creates the trust and places assets into it. This is why I talk about adopting the court record, because you have a beneficial interest in the use of that property by possession and enjoyment. Okay? It's literally an asset. Trustee, the person who holds and manages the trust property for the benefit of a third party, the beneficiary of the trust. Now, interesting here, the trustor is the one that creates the trust. The trustee is the one that holds and manages the trust property for the benefit of the third party, the beneficiary of the trust. Did you know all these people can be the same one? In this case, the trustee is not just a passive recipient, but has fiduciary duties to manage the assets per the trustor's instructions, usually for the beneficiary. Summary directionality. The role type is the benefactor. The giver or source is the benefactor. He's neither receiver or manager. There's just a beneficiary. This is the form of a simple trust. A trust shall not fail for want of trustee. So a benefactor can give something to his person without need for anything else. Okay. Grant. Grantor. Grantee. There's no beneficiary. There's no trustee. Again, it's just a grant from one person to another. Again, a gift from one to another. Trustor. Trust has to have a trustor assign a trustee, naming a beneficiary of the trust. So yes, the same relationship dynamic exists, though in the trust scenario, there's an extra layer. Okay, there's a trustee. In these, there's no trustee. They're just a direct giving from the benefactor to the beneficiary. The grantee or the grant is granted from the grantor to the grantee. This here, we have a trust that's set up, and the trustor creates the trust, names a trustee or assigns a trustee, and which is a contract because it's an assignment as signed. Okay, so it's an assignment of a trustee. It's a contract. And then beneficiary of the trust is named as well. Okay. So I put in the principal question or the next question, the trustor being the principal and creating a trust in his own legal name can also name himself as a beneficiary of the trust in his given and familial name, correct? And I put this in there to show you the distinction that they don't give one rat's ass about your name, okay? Because in this here, what you're doing is you're naming a trust. And that's what they've done. It's a legal name, a personification. And it names something. You have a beneficial interest in it. You can adopt it. And now as trustee, you hold it as an asset for the beneficiary. In that holding and trustee, you have a duty in law to make sure the records are correct. And it says, yes, a trustor, also called a settler or a grantor now, can absolutely name themselves as a beneficiary of the trust they create, including under the given name and familial name, i.e. their personal name. However, there are important legal nuances depending on the type of trust and jurisdiction. This is the important and key part when it comes to that trust or trustee beneficiary that I was talking about. It says here's how it typically works. Revocable living trust. Pay attention. Trustor, John Smith. Trustee, John Smith. Can also be someone else, or John Smith and another person jointly. Beneficiary, John Smith. This is very common in estate planning. John Smith creates a revocable living trust, names himself as the trustee and the initial beneficiary during his lifetime, and then names successor beneficiaries, i.e. children, spouses, upon his death. So this is an example of learning how to step up and take care of your own assets. And when you learn how to create a revocable living trust, name yourself as the trustee and the beneficiary, and then have successor beneficiaries. This setup keeps assets out of probate, allows the trustor to retain control during life, facilitates transfer upon death without court involvement, keeps assets out of probate. If it keeps assets out of probate, you suppose it keeps the assets out of the IRS. They also have an irrevocable trust, but more caution is needed. And the irrevocable trust, naming oneself as a beneficiary, can defeat the purpose of asset protection or estate tax planning, because the IRS or courts may treat the trust assets as still being under your control. In other words, legal title, which allows for control and entry, where equitable title allows for possession and use. And this is the property. Property, literally defined in jurisprudence, is the rights and interest in the possession and use of a thing for one's own enjoyment and benefit. And in an irrevocable trust, creditors may still access the assets if you are a beneficiary, because again, it's this one here is a irrevocable trust and is recorded. It may not provide the intended legal separation. Okay. Regarding in his given and familial name, that phrasing sounds like you're distinguishing between the legal name used to create the trust. Again, it's the use of the name, and it's used to create the trust. Constructive trust. You're going to construct an irrevocable trust. And the natural person identity, possibly in a legal theory or sovereignty context. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Teach your children the sovereignty context of the familial lineage, which is the legacy of the father, and the maternal parentage, which is the dowry of the mother, which is known as inheritance. You have a legacy from the father's side. You have an inheritance from the mother's side. The two become one flesh, and you are that flesh. You are literally an asset of that familial unit until you become age of majority. And now you go about the world and you have an estate already as a portion of your parents' estate assets. Remember the story of the prodigal son. In conventional law, you are one legal person, regardless of the name format used, given, family, all caps, etc. And courts don't recognize any artificial separation between your legal and natural identities if it's just a matter of naming style. So get away from the naming style and understand the competency of managing your own affairs, manning your post. So yes, a trustor can name himself as a beneficiary using his own legal name, but the courts will treat all these variations as referring to the same person, unless there's a legally distinct entity involved, like a corporation or separate legal personhood under statute. This would be the only reason you would distinguish the all caps name on the birth certificate as a creation of the state in a surrender to the United States as the actual entitlement, because it is grammatically styled as a title. That's the only case I would ever make for anything like that. And that is that birth certificate is evidence of entitlements, presumed, qualified, or otherwise. And so in summary, it says, yes, the trustor can name themselves a beneficiary. This is common and legal in revocable trusts. It's more complex and possibly problematic in irrevocable trusts. So again, you would want to do research to find out whether you would want to use an irrevocable trust. But again, those are more generally if you're going to use your assets as investments in the commercial system. If you want to keep a total legal separation, it's in my strong opinion, you use the irrevocable trust. You draw it up yourself as the trustor, the one that creates it. You name yourself as trustee because you're the one that knows what you want, and therefore you can revoke it if it doesn't go your way. That's why it's called a revocable trust, because you can change it during your lifetime. You can continue adding assets. You can continue naming beneficiaries. You can take assets off and you can take beneficiaries off. But an irrevocable trust, once you establish it and you name beneficiaries and assets, before you can change it or stop that trust, you have to disperse all the assets to the beneficiaries, and then you can reconstruct a new trust. That's the problem with the irrevocable. Because before you can change anything, if you find an error, you have to distribute the assets to the beneficiaries as the trust stated, as you intended. So a revocable trust allows you to make changes during your lifetime. Irrevocable trust does not. You have to settle it or disperse the assets to the beneficiaries first to collapse the trust before you can then reestablish a new trust with those assets. And that would only be with the assets that would be remaining. You can't deny the beneficiaries of a trust. Naming formats, given, familial name, don't create separate legal persons in the eyes of conventional law. It just doesn't. So what does create the separation? Like I said before, is the creation itself. And so as a prime example, I'm going to talk to you about Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, and Tom Sawyer. So Samuel Clemens was the first person. And he had this idea in his head that he talked to himself in his personification, his pen name, Mark Twain, and instructed Mark Twain to write down this story as a second person. And when Mark Twain wrote that story down as a second person with instructions from the first person, Samuel Clemens, he was writing about third persons, characters that are totally fiction. So again, I hope everybody understands language is a twisted and perverted thing. But you're supposed to rise up against any tongue that would place judgment against you and condemn that tongue. Not the man, but the tongue, which means the language, the words, which means if you want to learn how to condemn those languages, those words, you have to learn those languages, those words. That's why I tell people I get into the philology, the etiology, etymology, epistemology, the roots and origins of things. I study the history. I go back to the beginnings. In modern day Christianity, absolutely not. Like I said before, that 501c3 church is a false church, just like the false patriarch. Passing around a tribute pay to pay the church with fiat currency. And everybody claims to be a resident on the church register. Absolutely. Well, that brings me to the end of today's stream, the summary on the last 7 videos. Again, I would urge people to watch them. Let your children watch them. Understand how imperative it is for you to stand up and start manning your post as the one to educate your children. because society's making them delusional. It's becoming standard. Hatred and division is becoming standard. Hitler's willing executioners, just doing their job, taking home a paycheck, licking the boots of that false patriarch. And with that, I'm done. You guys know me. I love you. But I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. I say I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may your God love you and bless you. Have a good night. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks again.